For this week, we'll be looking at Chapter 3 from Exploring Public Speaking, 3rd edition. This week, we'll be looking at ethics, sources, credibility, using those sources and avoiding plagiarism, and lastly, ethical listening. What is that? We need to start out, obviously, then, with a definition of the word ethics. And the textbook gives us a really big one. The branch of philosophy that involves determinations of what is right and wrong. We'll have a better one a little later on when we review this, but be kind of pulling that and mulling that over in your head. So it's determining right and wrong when you have a situation that calls for making a choice. And yes, to go back, this is obviously a core concern for a communication class because it affects the individual, our communities, and actually our whole democracy is impacted by the ethics of our communication as a society. Some fun sources to think about. Where does ethics or determining right and wrong come from? Well, legally, we have the Bill of Rights in the United States of America. That's one of the things on which our country is founded. The First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or of the press. The Supreme Court takes up decisions about things, and it's either yes, we agree, or no, we disagree. And so there's a lot that we have about ethics. There are actually some interesting exceptions to freedom of expression. Did you know that you cannot make a threat on the life of our president? You may not disagree with the president, and that's okay. And you certainly may say why you disagree quite strongly, but you may not threaten the life of the president. Communities also can set requirements for public safety. One you may have heard of, I think is pretty common, is it's illegal to yell fire if you're in a crowded movie theater because that can just cause harm to people there. And then obviously speeches that are trying to incite violence, sometimes those are problems. And then when there's defamation, the great thing is that it's a little more difficult with social media, but you can at least, you have the right to, if someone is slandering and defaming you, to sue them and make them stop. So some other sources of ethics. So we've got our government basis. Well, here's some other ones. Our culture, religious upbringing. One that some of you may have heard, the Golden Rule. We'll cite that in just a minute. But you think about the Golden Rule, that's one. Community standards, your family upbringing. I know in my family, you better tell the truth. If they caught you in a lie, you would be in trouble in my family. Anybody's family like that? So here's the Golden Rule. You heard it. Do unto others as you would they do unto you, or treat others the way you would like to be treated. Fun source of the Golden Rule and it can be traced back to the Christian Bible, and it also can be traced back to Eastern religious text. So it's kind of a fun thing that, in other words, we've been talking about this for a long time. Now, here are some other rules, societal rules that you may have heard about. Have you ever heard about the power of speakers to mislead the audience? He was just trying to trick those people. Everybody's talking about that a lot these days politically. The next one, the good man or woman speaking well. This is a basis for this whole communication class. We believe as a society that you need to be a good speaker. You need to be able to communicate effectively. How about the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Anybody ever heard that one? Or consequences are the judge. My grandma always put it this way: if you don't listen, you're going to have to feel. And most of the time she was right. If I didn't listen to her, I ended up hurting myself. And then the equal opportunity to fully participate. This is something that we've heard, we've discussed, and some of these are brought up in questions right now. For example, Well, the equal opportunity to fully participate with the whole discussion of racial inequality in this country. Does everybody have the ability to fully participate? What does that look like? What does it need to look like? How do we do that ethically? So thinking about all these who taught you, and you think, well, these are pretty much American values. I think I've learned these because I'm an American citizen and have heard these my whole life, and that's why I believe them. And that's, I think you probably have. But here's the book points out, it's kind of interesting to think about. Look where some of these things, some of these are isms. In other words, they become studies in themselves. Others, Plato, Quintilian, and other names like that, always fun to look at where they started. So, in other words, for thousands of years, we've been asking these questions, and we still haven't figured them out. It kind of helps me when I think about the unrest in our society today as we grapple with ethics. It makes me feel a little bit better to go, oh, so we've been talking about this for all these thousands of years and we've never completely figured it out. Whew, okay. And I put the picture there. You may recognize Auguste Rodin's The Thinker. What I love about The Thinker, I don't know if you saw Night at the Museum. I'm thinking. Anyway, but I've just always loved Rodin's sculpture. And the interesting thing is that as he's sitting there, as the thinker is doing his thinking, what he's actually looking down is onto Dante's Inferno, and he's looking through the gates of hell into hell. Never knew that's what he was actually looking at, huh? So our ethics then builds our credibility, and our credibility is, are we believable? And that will differ from audience to audience. Some audiences will believe you about some things and others won't. So that's and credibility can change within a speech. If you start talking and you go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't really know what I'm talking about," and you use powerlessness, then it can take away your power, and people may think that you're less credible at the end than the beginning, even. Now let's move on over to plagiarism. Plagiarism, obviously, is using somebody's words and not giving them credit. You can read all this other info about it. So, what are the types? Our text is pretty harsh with what they say are the three types: stealing, sneaking, and borrowing. And that just seems so that I found another source, and look, I cited it. See what I did to be ethical? I told you the source. And because this is public speaking, if I were just telling you the speech, I'd have to say it out loud. That's why you have to say sources out loud in this class. So the virtual text calls it global plagiarism, submitting the entire work from somebody else as yours and saying, here you go, this is mine. That's global plagiarism. Then there's patchwork and incremental plagiarism. Here's my belief. I believe most of us are honest, and I believe most of us do not participate in global plagiarism. However, patchwork plagiarism, cutting and pasting without using sources or citing them, saying them out loud, or citing some of them but not all of it, or paraphrasing it and saying, well, that's close enough to my idea. I do believe that all of us participate in patchwork and incremental plagiarism. So we do need to be aware of this. I know I've done patchwork plagiarism before, even as a teacher, when I'm telling you about something and I might start talking about what that is without telling you who created that idea. Like last week when we talked about Kenneth Burke's terministic screens, if I didn't say to you then it was Kenneth Burke's, if I just said terministic screens are the filters, the way we filter our world, you wouldn't have known that I was patchwork plagiarizing. So it's something to keep in mind and guard against. So let's go back to, okay, what is ethics again? You said that you had a better definition. Yeah, here's another one from the virtual text. Ethics is making decisions about right and wrong within a dilemma. What's a dilemma? A dilemma is when you have to make a choice. So I'm making a decision about what's right or wrong when I have a choice about it. And we get the word ethics from Aristotle's use of ethos or credibility. So back to credibility. So it all plays in together. Making decisions about right or wrong. The ethical standards, there it is again, ethics again. Ethical standards are the principles we abide by, and because we think about those rules that we've learned from childhood, and so those are ones we use to follow. But here's a question. The discussion question is, I should always tell the truth, true or false. Think about that for a second. Should I tell the truth if when I tell the truth, it's going to hurt someone's feelings? If I were to say something about somebody's outfit, they say, how do I look? And I know they're having a bad day. Do I need to say, well, your hair's a little fuzzy, Miss Ward, really, and your face is looking a little, you really don't look the best in this, or do I just say, you look fine. You look fine enough for this speech. So I think there's lines that we're constantly having to decide. Many times people say, would you tell a lie if it was to protect someone else in your family? Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. At what point would you tell the truth even if it harmed your family? We could debate that one for a long time. So another thing that we need to do to be ethical is not only be ethical in how we present and how incredible, and be thinking about our morale, how we have our morality and what's our feelings there, but we need to develop ethical listening skills. And again, from the virtual textbook, one way that we can, or some ways, well, how do we develop these ethical listening skills? Actively interpreting the material. So in other words, instead of just sitting here watching this PowerPoint zoning out, instead pause the video and say, wait a minute, what did she say about, what was ethics again? Make it a choice in a dilemma. What? Okay, go back and find out. So actively interpret the material that's being shared, analyzing the content. And then when you're listening to a speaker, whether they're live or being, a video, you need to evaluate their effectiveness. And here's something important. Look at what's called unethical responses. I really enjoyed your speech. Your speech lacks supportive information. You're the worst public speaker ever. 3 very different sounding statements, but all of them are unethical, because ethical listening would mean that you're actively interpreting and giving the information to the speaker so that they can make their speech more effective the next time. So there's some ethical responses listed there. So how do I listen? You've got to get rid of distractions. If you're doing an online class, you may have to go in a room like this and, I've shut my door. I'm focused in here. I'm doing my work. And then I have to involve my critical mind. Again, not passive, but critically. One thing you can do, and I recommend with the text and with any study, don't read it. Interact with it. There is a difference. Read the stuff at the first. Read the stuff at the end and ask yourself, what do I know about that? What do I not know about that? So involve your critical mind. And then another thing is, going back to Kenneth Burke and terministic screens, try to stretch your screens. I like to imagine a terministic screen as this, where, I can see through it, but it's kind of difficult. So what I need to do when I listen to somebody, particularly to somebody with whom I don't think I agree, is stretch stretch myself so that, hey, maybe I can hear a little better. I can see a little more clearly what you're trying to say, and go, oh, I still disagree with you, but I see where you're getting your points. If you are in a live presentation, obviously showing your listening by body language helps, not necessary in an online. Have a good week, and I look forward to hearing your information.